Hey, everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of Stories Sustain Us. I'm your host, Stephen Schauer, and I'm excited to be here. Thank you all for joining me for this very first episode. This is a show idea that I've been working on for many years, and I'm just super excited that it's finally come to life. So before we jump into our first discussion with our very first guest, I thought it'd be helpful if I told you a little bit about what Stories Sustain Us is going to cover. So, as implied in the title, Story Sustain Us, we're going to be talking about sustainability on this show. Now, that's a very big term that covers a whole lot of different topics. So, clearly, we're going to be talking about environmental issues. It's like climate change, obviously, and how are we going to preserve and protect our oceans and freshwater systems and other ecosystems all around the planet, not just for the benefit of us humans, but how are we going to do so in a way that protects the planet for all the other creatures that we need to share it with. But sustainability is much more than just environmental issues. It also covers a wide array of social issues. So, on this program, we'll be talking about things like how are we going to improve healthcare and education? How are we going to end poverty? How are we going to provide affordable transportation? How are we going to reduce inequalities that still persist in all different areas of our social structure around the world? And then the final piece of the puzzle that fits under sustainability is economics. How are we going to do all of this environmental work that we need to do, social change that we need to do, and do all of that important work in a way that is also sustainable from an economic perspective? So, on this show, Story Sustain Us, we're going to look at sustainability really from the triple bottom line approach of people, planet, and profits. So that's kind of the subject matter we're going to talk about. And how are we going to do that is also implied in the title, Story Sustain Us. We're going to use the power of storytelling, facts and figures and data. All of that's very important and will be covered on this show, undoubtedly. But facts and figures and data alone isn't what's going to move people into action. Data doesn't inspire people to go change their behavior. What really moves people to action is when a story can reach out and grab your heart, make you understand the situation, and want to do something differently. And that's what we're going to try to accomplish with this program, Story Sustain Us. We're going to have guests on each week, and they're going to talk about their own personal journey. So we get to know the guest a little bit, and then we'll dive into a conversation about their work, the amazing things that these people are doing all around the world to make the world a better place. But we're going to do so through the power of storytelling, not just with facts and figures and data. So ultimately, what we're trying to accomplish with this program is to use the power of storytelling to inspire people into action. So that's kind of the goal. That's what we're aiming for. That's what I hope we can deliver. So let's jump into our very first episode. And let me tell you first a little bit about our guest, and then we'll dive into the conversation. Our first guest is Adam Stielstra. He's the chief storyteller for Narrative Paintbrush, and he is dedicated to making an impact around the world. Adam uses his storytelling experience and skills to create narratives that improve lives. With extensive experience in film, the arts, and storytelling, he collaborates with his clients to create narratives that deeply connect with audiences. His work has been recognized with several awards over the years, and Adam has tackled diverse topics and causes, and notably, Adam played an integral role in creating the acclaimed Numa film series, which sparked global conversations. When Adam is not telling stories, he is basking in music and nature, playing with his dogs, and being a dad. I've known Adam for a number of years now, and I'm really grateful that he agreed to be my first guest on this program. So let's jump into episode 1 of Stories Sustain Us and hear about Adam's story. All right. Well, Adam, welcome. Welcome to episode number 1 of Stories Sustain Us. You are the first guest on my new podcast. So, welcome, my friend. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing just fine, and it's an honor to be the first guest. I hope I can kick it off well for you, and I think it's just exciting that you're doing this, and we have a cool background together, and and storytelling is at the core of how we know each other, why we know each other, how we work together, and really what brings us back here. So yeah, thanks for thinking of me and inviting me on.
Absolutely. Well, let me tell a little bit of that story, that background about how storytelling connects us, so that folks can understand that, because it really does. Storytelling does connect us, and you being my first guest is important to me because of our working relationship. And for those who don't know, I've made a few documentary films in my background over the last decade, and the first one that I ever made was really about a dozen years ago. Right about at this time, 12 years ago, I came up with an idea for a documentary film. And having never made a film before, I had been working with Adam on some commercial spots and some other PSAs and things that we were doing at the time together. And I knew he was the right person for me to share this vision of a film with. And I gave him as much as I could out of my head. And he took that vision, and was the cinematographer, was the director, was the editor, and took that vision and turned it into a reality, an award-winning reality. By the way, we won a few awards with that documentary film. And that for me really sparked this sense in me that, oh, I do have some creativity in me. Because prior to that point in my life, I don't know that I really latched on to that belief that there was a creative energy inside of me. And you kind of cracked that open, and watching you work, I was absorbing what you were doing. I was, really paying attention to how you created this film, and that inspired me to go on to make a couple more movies. And now here I am trying a new thing that I've never done before, podcasting. And I couldn't think of a better person to bring on than you, to help me tell the audience about storytelling, because that's what this show is about. It's about storytelling under the really large umbrella of sustainability, but it's really about connecting human hearts through the power of storytelling. So thank you very much for joining me on this first episode. Um, so tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell the audience a little bit about your background, Adam. How did, where you born? What was childhood like, up to kind of your current day profession? What are some highlights of the life of Adam Stielstra?
Sure. There's a story for you, right? Born in Michigan in the 70s, and in a little town near Lake Michigan shoreline, and grew up, I would say, kind of lower middle class, maybe even poorer than that. But we lived in a little place where everyone was the same, so you didn't know any different. And surrounded by beautiful Michigan woods and Lake Michigan, and it was kind of dreamy, kind of heavenly for me. And from my earliest memories, stories have motivated just about everything I do in life. And making things up, make believe, staying in that make believe frame of mind. I've been doing that since I was a little kid, and trying to get others to play along. Kind of been a director since my single digits. You're this guy, you're that person, you're this person. All right, now we're all going to stay in our roles and act this stuff out. So I always see life as movies, or the written word. And I was kind of brought up in a family that really encouraged the arts. My dad owned radio stations and recording studios, and so music was a big part. He was also a working jazz musician, so he was always gigging, and then music was just always there. He helped start Blue Lake Public Radio in Michigan, which is one of the first public radio stations.
Right on.
And probably the best known, but just an amazing thing for Blue Lake's Fine Arts Camp. So I got to meet people like Bill Cosby and went back when he was still all right, by the way. Bob Hope.
Oh, wow.
People who would come and appear on the stage at the Performing Arts Center at Blue Lake, and they would broadcast it live, so we get to be exposed to all this stuff early on. Moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan, went to high school there, and made a lot of friends there, had roots there for a long time. and then got married, ended up moving around, having kids, and now I reside just outside Boulder, Colorado. So,
So
which for me, this place is truly heaven. This is where I was meant to be. I would not want to live anywhere else.
yeah, right on. Well, I'm glad you landed where you are at home.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how you got into filmmaking. I get the, being a director from your single digits and, imagination and, you playing with your friends and everything. When did a camera end up in your hands and you start um, creating art from the perspective of films and whatnot? How did that happen in your life?
Well, that was a progression from pursuing art in the form of drawing and painting, pottery, things like that. Being exposed to as many different art forms as I could be. Also, music lessons, and music really stuck with me from an early age too. But
Yeah, you
uh,
play an instrument? You're
I
what do you
do.
play?
I'm a multi-instrumentalist actually, so you
Right
can't
on.
see it here, but I'm surrounded
I
by.
got the guitar back there. I see that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you got one. Yeah,
yeah.
there's four others right next
Several
to me.
around. Nice.
Um, but yeah, I play several different instruments. I compose music. I do that really on the side. It's not my day gig, but I
Yeah,
kind of wish it was. That was the original goal.
yeah,
Um, but it's all storytelling in some way. When we sit down and look at a piece of art, even if it's a static painting or a photo, there's a story there, and
sure.
we need words to describe the feelings that the art gives us, right? So those words translating emotions, that's the story. And so I have been in love with that idea. When I really kind of came to terms with it, I guess would be high school when we were introduced to photography,
Yeah,
and we had film and film cameras and dark rooms, and um, I wasn't so good of a drawer and a painter, although I really wanted to be, and I still to this day envy people who are.
yeah,
Um, but I found that I could compose photographs that could get me very close to what I wanted to express, but with other means.
yeah.
And so I started taking that very seriously. So that was the first time I actually had cameras in my hands.
And this was
And I
pre-digital camera era, right? This was actual photography. You said
yeah,
darkroom is, so this was actually,
black and white, enlargers, dark rooms,
yeah,
chemicals, all
yeah,
the whole thing. Yeah.
right on.
And what I learned was how I could tell a story with a single frame. Um, and I still abide by this philosophy today. It's my mantra when I'm taking still photographs, which I don't do as much anymore. But every picture you take, if you're really in it to be a photographer, every picture you take should tell a story. That will make it a successful photograph.
Yeah,
That'll be something people want to look at and explore. How do I feel about this? What's it saying to me? What am I learning from it? What am I learning about myself by gazing at it for a long time? What's the story there? So I always approach things in that way. And that's really when I started. And, we had friends, parents, video cameras and things like that in high school to make ridiculous movies, with my friends where you had to, you're doing it all in camera, right? So you had to make sure that your editing was also your next shot. So
sure.
shoot it this way, and you had to you only had one take, because then the next time you hit record on the camera, it had to be the cut.
Right, right.
And so that was, the buffoonery that takes place when you're doing stuff like that is hilarious to sit back and watch. And so I started to understand sequence of shots, and then I started to understand how two shots put together tell a different story than two shots sort of separate.
Sure,
Right?
sure.
If you took a photograph of something and then you took a photograph of something else and you framed them together in the same frame, you now have a story. you have a story that's different than if you put each one of those photographs in different frames.
Right.
So it's that idea of, and the emotional connection, the cultural connections that happen when you take two images and put them next to each other. When I was in high school, I saw a film in a philosophy class that
Mm-hmm.
blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind. And I fell deeply in love with motion picture storytelling when I saw this film. This is what tipped me over the edge and made me say, wow, art, this is sort of like art at its best, in my opinion. So
Do you
it's a
recall
film.
what the film was or what it was
Yeah,
about? Yeah.
yeah, no, of course. And and I still watch it regularly to this day. And we're talking like, I saw it in 1992
Yeah.
and I still watch it. It still sometimes brings me to tears. It's so amazing. But it's called Kayana, and it's a film by Gottfried Reggio. Philip Glass wrote the soundtrack, which is second to none. Fantastic, kind of mind blowing in and of itself. And back in those days, and it was all shot in like 65 millimeter, blown up to 70. So it was like big widescreen CinemaScope, and there's no actors, there's no dialogue, there's no actual human voice. It's just music and images.
Wow. Yeah.
For 90 minutes. And the philosophy of what I was just talking about, where you can stack an image after another image, there's no better study in that than Kayana, and then the subsequent films that were made in this sort of this family of films that went on to include Powakatsi and Nekakatsi, and then Baraka and Samsara. And I'd say maybe the best of them all is Baraka.
Yeah.
But have you seen that?
I've seen that one, and I've seen Samsara, and they're stunning. They're amazing. Yeah. If they're all made by that same family of
The
folks.
director from the first three kind of just gave the project over to his cinematographer, a guy named Ron Frick, and so Ron went on to make Baraka and Samsara.
Yeah, they're absolutely must-see films. They're so moving and powerful without, like you said, without words. It's just the imageries, the stories that they're telling, just grab you deep. And
I think it's
hold you there.
Yeah. I think it's every bit as much storytelling as The Princess Bride.
Sure, 100%. I agree with that. Yeah.
It's you gotta sit with it. You need to be in it. But once you start watching it, and it pulls you in, and it's got just as much flow and just as much arc as a movie like The Princess Bride, where the whole thing's being narrated from a storybook. You know what I mean? The Princess Bride is kind of hand-fed, but the storytelling is just as strong in this other film that's no actors, no speaking, music and images all around the world. I mean, incredible.
Those are amazing films. All three of those that you mentioned that I've seen on my favorites list. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that happened my senior year of high school. I saw that film, and that just sort of shifted everything in my head, because I had wanted to be a fiction writer. But I didn't really know what to study, and I was coming up on graduating from high school, and eventually, within 2 years after graduation, I went to film school, and so I went to Columbia College Chicago art school and studied cinematography in the 90s. And, from there, I got sort of fast-tracked. I took it very seriously, and I got noticed. And so when people would call the school and say, hey, can we borrow one of your students to work on this film for free, I was the one they chose. And so that turned into paying gigs, and eventually as a camera assistant. And then eventually I moved up to cinematographer. And then in 2000, I started a very wise person came up to me on a set and said, "Do you direct also?" Because I was the director of photography on that shoot.
Yeah.
And he kind of waited until the director was away.
Sure.
And he said, "Do you
There's
direct?"
the wisdom.
Yeah, right. And I said, "No, I don't." And he said, "Well, you should. Would you direct? We've got some projects coming up. Would you direct those? Would you take a crack at it?
Yeah.
I think you're better than the director we're working with right now." And so it's a huge compliment. And, you learn to never say no. What I've learned to do is to advance in my own career is always say yes, and then just scramble to learn whatever it is between when you said yes and when you're committed to actually do it.
Sure.
And if it's in you, you'll find it, and you can weave that into your work. And so that's what I did. So yeah, that's what kind of kicked my career off and what lit the fuse for storytelling for me.
Yeah. Can I back you up just a bit in time? I seem to recall a time you told me a story about before you got to Chicago in film school. It was a wonderful story that you told me about how you kind of found out that you were really good at this, and kind of got some support from your family to help you along the way. You mind sharing that story? Because it's a great story to really emphasize that at a very young age you had a skill for this, and I'd love to have you share that with everybody if you don't mind.
No, I'm happy to. So, it really starts with it starts with me being in love. So I was in love, and I put my life on pause to follow a young lady down to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and be near her while she studied at the University of Michigan, and I kind of just worked. So in that time, she challenged me, what are you going to do with your life? What are you going to be? What's your career? And I didn't really know. And then when I started doing some real heavy thinking about it, soul searching, I guess, as they say, but filmmaking was the thing that came up because I hadn't really done anything with the fiction writing, and I think I just romanticized being a writer more than anything else. But filmmaking seemed like a real thing. And so I moved back to Michigan and I said, "Mom, Dad, I want to go to film school." And they said, "You haven't done anything since you graduated from high school."
And this is back in Grand Rapids?
Yeah. So I moved back from Ann Arbor and they said, "Prove to us that you're serious about this. Enroll in the local community college, take a few classes, show us that you're committed, and then we'll think about it in a year." Because Columbia is not cheap to go to anyway.
Sure.
So I said, all right. So I signed up at the Grand Rapids Community College. A friend and I together signed up for the one and only film class that they taught there. And on the first day of this class, they said, your grade will be based on two things. At the end of the semester, they'll be based on an exam that you take, 50%, and the other 50% will be based on a film that you're going to be required to make. And we said, yes, yes, we get to make a film. That's why we took this class, and this is like the best news we've gotten all year. And so he wanted to be an actor. I wanted to just be something that had to do with the camera, a storyteller of some kind. I didn't really know the names and the roles at that point. I just loved films, all the classic films. Oh, by the way, that girl left me that I followed. And so I spent a summer grieving, and the way that I sort of drowned my sorrows was by watching, like having movie marathons every day. And I had a crash course in all the classic films for 3 months.
Yeah.
Films like The Godfather 1 and 2, Raging Bull, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, those films.
It's classics, yeah.
Soccer punched me, and just, especially Raging Bull and Godfather 2, I was like, all right, this is it. I have to do, this is like, I have no choice. Like, this is my calling. I have to.
You were grabbed, yeah.
So we said, all right, we're up for this challenge in this community college film class, but they said, here's the caveat. We don't have it. This is a small program. It's really just like a joke. They said, we don't have any cameras. We don't have any lights. We have no editing capabilities. So good luck with your film that 50% of your grade depends upon. But I've got this punk rock ethos that I was born with too. And so we did what we had to do to pull everything together to make a film. And we borrowed cameras from other places. We got lights if we could, or we just shot without lights. But we shot for months. We shot for the whole semester, on and off, whenever we could pull friends together to kind of help tell this strange story, which was kind of diluted and not fully realized, but oh well.
Yeah.
It was my first film.
First crack, yeah.
Yeah. So the end of the semester comes, and by the way, I had a friend in a film program at a nearby university, and he said, you can come here on a weekend and I'll help you, and we can use the editing capabilities. This was all shot on VHS too. So
nice.
We turned it black and white. We letterboxed it. We did some things with the frame rates, just try to make it look as filmy as we could, as cinematic as possible. And I think we did a pretty darn good job considering. And spent 3 days with almost no sleep editing the thing, because we had to do it in a weekend in between weeks at that university just to use the gear without getting kicked out because I wasn't a student. And we finished it, and we brought it to the professors of our community college, and we said, we've got our film. It's done, and next week you're showing these films. Ours is really long. It's a feature film length. But we have it queued up here on the VHS to just watch these 5 minutes. These are our favorite 5 minutes. So put this in and watch, and then please, show it next week when you show all the student films. So they said, all right. So a week goes by. We took our exam, the other 50% of our grade.
Yeah.
And screening day came, and it was like a 3-hour class, and we sat there all 3 hours, and they never showed the clip of our film. And we were crushed.
Yeah.
My friend was the lead actor. There I am. I got the first time ever I'm seeing my name, director, in the credits on hopefully on a big screen, and nothing comes up. And so we were devastated. We couldn't imagine why they wouldn't show just the clip. So after the class ended, we went down and talked. There were 2 professors, and we went down and talked to them both. And we said, why didn't you show our film? They said, yeah, because that's not your film. And we said, what do you mean? They said, there's no way you made this. There's one of the things they pointed out was continuity issues, because we'd shot some scenes. It was a fall semester, so we shot some scenes where leaves were green, then leaves were brown, then there were no leaves, and the cuts were close together. And I didn't know about continuity. I wasn't thinking about that.
Yeah.
So they said, this was somebody else's project. We don't believe you made it. And they flunked us, completely flunked us. We each got 50%, so it's a failing grade.
Yeah.
I was irate. I was heartbroken. But I knew that they're professors of a community college film class in the 90s. They just had never seen someone take this seriously. The next best films that were being shown were people aiming a camera out their minivans, shooting Christmas tree lights.
Yeah.
Home
movies,
what I was
right?
Up against.
Right.
So they just had no way of believing what they were seeing, because no one had ever tried that hard. So I failed, and I had to go to my parents, who said, if you succeed, we'll help you go to a real film school. And so my success story was that I failed. So I went to them, and they knew the work I'd done. They'd seen everything. My mom's was a teacher, and it was her school that provided the camera we used. So they honestly said, your failing grade is proof enough for us that we need to send you to a place where they're going to take you seriously. Yeah. And so that's what they did. And so by failing, I completely succeeded.
I love that story. And the first time you told me that, I was like, that's such a beautiful story, because it is the way life often works. We fail at something, but it is in that failure that we are launched into a new success. And you know, it's such a great story for this show, and a great story of your life. And I appreciate you sharing that with me. And let me transition you now into, you know, teach the audience the art of storytelling. That's one of the reasons I wanted to have you come on this show. Is really kind of set the table for future episodes, that this is about storytelling around issues that revolve around sustainability. But first, we have to kind of grasp and understand what the art of storytelling really is, and how it moves people to action better than data, better than facts and figures. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to achieve with this show, is to have people come on and share their personal stories, the stories about the great work they're doing, the ways that they're trying to make this planet better for all inhabitants. Um, but I don't want it to be just data driven show. That's not what this is. This is about stories, because it's stories that move people into action. So tell us, what is the art of storytelling, and what makes up a good story, and how can a story grab someone's emotional being and move them into action?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. It's also a really big question.
Sure, sure.
Um, I kind of refer to myself as like a blue collar storyteller, just because I don't have an Oscar. I have a couple Emmy nominations, but but
You don't have an
I
Oscar
love story.
yet.
Yeah, right. But I love storytelling, and,
Yeah.
and yeah, it pays my bills, and it flows in my veins. I have no choice but to do it. Right. That's, I think, maybe to start my answer would be to say, when you feel called to do something, it's an irresistible thing. It's like it's guiding you. You don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
It'll either eat you up, or you need to just go do it. And I've been eaten up by things, and it's better to go do it. I have a happier life when I'm actually fulfilling the urge to make art, and in my case, make art with a purpose. So, I mean, just for a little bit of background reference, I, for the most part in my career, have told stories that are based on messages that help people. So, stories for humanitarian aid related subjects, stories around spirituality, stories around non-ordinary states of consciousness, stories around energy and sustainability, and working with you to do environmental related things. So many different stories around stuff, like you say, that really is sort of in the nuts and bolts could be data driven, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not how humans communicate. If we were
Right.
robots, maybe, right? But we are spiritual beings, and so stories are how we take in that emotion and share it back. So I like to say, I take a message and I weave a story out of that message so that people can relate to that message. They can have this aha moment and say, I love that story. And then you say, well, what was the message? And they can easily tell you what the message was, but how they got there
Yeah.
is the important tool, right? It's the thing that gracefully brought them from a beginning to an end on an emotional arc that landed on what this message is. And that is absorbed emotionally into this spirit that is each one of us. And that's the power of art in all its forms. So how do I do it? There's a basic formula that I follow. It's about the only kind of like formulaic data kind of thing I'll even mention in all of this, but
Yeah.
it really starts with the narrative arc. And you could be talking about a 60-second piece of powerful storytelling, or you could be talking about a 90-minute piece of power, and anything in between. Um, but it starts with an arc, and the arc is the path, the emotional path, and the time path of the story. What happens in that arc will change the curve of the arc. The
Yeah.
drama will increase, and there will be very significant moments. And you can break it down in sort of like how plays are broken down into thirds. Films are as well,
Mm-hmm.
and books are as well. And so that's a very simple formula. But it's what do you do with it? What happens in that arc, in those thirds? What are the transitions, the pivotal moments? How have you drawn someone in with what you've created at the beginning, and then made a shift in the middle, and then ended it in a with a good resolve, with a satisfactory resolve of some kind. And in my case, that's always the aha moment when they get the message
Yeah.
through the emotion of the story. So I think not everybody's good at this. I think that we all have the ability to tell stories. I think we all have the ability to harness creativity to our advantages. But I think that some people are just sort of cut out more for that than others. In the same way that I don't have any idea how to use an Excel spreadsheet. Right? I wasn't cut out for that. I literally can't figure those things out. So, and they're supposedly really easy, right? But my mind doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So telling stories, it's about the delivery. It's about the emotion and sort of it's very much like music, especially classical music. Although so much of music is storytelling, even the instrumental stuff like classical, where you're following swells and crescendos and then drops, and
Yeah.
there's an
All
arc to
those
all.
emotional waves. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so uh, that's what a good story does too. And by the end, hopefully you're good enough that you've had the attention of the audience the entire time. And by the end, they walk away with that message or that emotional impact.
Yeah.
But I will say, I don't think there's like a one size fits all. Like if you do it this way, you'll always succeed. I think it really depends on who's telling the story and what is the story. Is the
Sure.
story any good too? Right.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of storytellers can take a boring message or a boring theme and weave it into something that's so much more interesting that by the end you're like, I never thought shoelaces would be that cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can be done.
Yeah. Well, I'm personally a big fan of Joseph Campbell and The Power of Myth, and The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and some of his works that kind of capture that storytelling arc that humanity has used since we started, painting figures on cave walls,
Yeah.
thousands and tens of thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
That idea of that hero's journey, that is kind of a formula, but like you said, it does take a person with a skill set in weaving that narrative together, in following that arc of the call to action. I was thinking of what you just shared a moment ago about your own, the hero's journey of Adam, that you have this call in you. You have to go create things that that would eat you up inside if you didn't follow that call. So that's kind of like the beginning phase of your personal hero's journey of having to go out and adventure into the unknown of what is that mean for you, and
Yeah.
finding help along the way and struggling along the way and having hardships along the way, and then eventually achieving that success and returning, kind of full circle almost, after having gone on that journey. And it's when you see it in a film or hear it in music or read it in a book, and when it's done well, it's inescapable. You can't help but be drawn in, by the power of a good story.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful that we'll have some really great stories on this show around these issues of sustainability, and it's a giant umbrella. um, all of human activities essentially kind of fall within sustainability in one way or another. Can you talk a little bit about some of the work you hinted at, some of the things that you've done?
Yeah.
But not only are you a great storyteller, but you've been telling really powerful stories around, like you said, energy, and there's some other work that I know you're working on right now that's incredibly powerful. Can you talk a little bit about some of that?
Sure. Yeah. So one thing I will say too, just quickly, is that back to the storytelling idea of how is a good story told. This is something I say quite often when I'm giving pitches, or sometimes at screenings when we're showing things that I've made.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone can, think of the best movie you've seen in a long time, and then think of the worst movie you've seen in a long time. When people see a bad movie, everybody's a critic. Everybody seems to know everything they need to know about filmmaking, and they can tell you exactly why this story was no good. But when you think of a film, or any story, whatever format that comes in, but we'll use film as an example. When you think of one you've seen that's so good, like this Koyaanisqatsi or Baraka that I was talking about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot pinpoint all the things that made it great. You're just left with a feeling.
Right.
And that feeling is what I crave, right? So
Right.
I like to make things that give other people that feeling, because I get that feeling while I make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
My ideal situation would, at screening something I've made, is if I could sit facing the audience while they watch the thing.
Yeah.
Because just seeing other people, I've seen it 1,000 times. I don't need to see it again. When I make something, I'm done with it. I move on. I don't ever watch stuff I've done. But for that time, just after, when it's fresh, it's great to see others and see how it impacts them, because I had that feeling the whole time I was making it. So so what am I working on? I'm working on a few different projects right now. I have a mini documentary that is 20 minutes long. It's going to be entered into some film festivals here in the U.S., about 20 different festivals this year. I hope, we'll see how many it gets accepted into. I think it'll probably do pretty well, but it's about energy and sustainability, with all types of energy, fossil and renewable and nuclear and geothermal and hydro and all the rest. And so it's called The Energy Dilemma, and it's really, the point of it, the goal of it, is to not only educate, but to essentially, what we did was we took people who would never sit in the same room and be friendly and have a
Yeah.
friendly conversation about these subjects. So the idea was, well, if we can't get them in a room, then we'll put them in a film, which will feel like a type of room, and they'll be sort of, playing off each other in the edit. And so it's all about the unfolding and sculpting that takes place in the edit, especially
Sure.
with documentaries.
Yeah, I love the
Um,
editing room on the documentaries I've made. That's where the story comes to life, because you
that's
get to
it.
piece it together, and
Yeah,
that's
you're chiseling.
yep, yep,
Yeah, and so So there's that, and I'm excited to see where that goes. The goal ultimately is to make it into a full feature, but our budget was relatively small for this, a few $100,000, and so I think we did a lot with it. Though
Yeah.
we traveled all over the place, got a lot of wonderful experts to be in it. Another project I'm working on right now is in the world of a very close to my heart subject, fighting sex trafficking, starting now domestically in the U.S., but then the bigger vision is to take this plan and take it to other countries. But sex trafficking, I think it's about the darkest subject that there is. It's the most evil crime on earth, in my opinion. I could almost say that as like a fact, because when you start to hear these stories, you'll never be the same.
Yeah.
And so what I did was created 7 60-second PSAs. We've shot a few of them, not all of them yet. And none of this has been released, right? So, but it's coming, and we're excited to see what it does. It will be the first anti-trafficking campaign of its kind. It should make some real serious waves when it comes out. And our goal is to have one of these PSAs run during the Super Bowl. Maybe not this next one, but for sure the one after. So we're excited about that. But, that's a challenge because I'm taking a really dark subject and I'm trying to weave a story out of that that's still acceptable, but almost not acceptable. It brings you right to the edge of total discomfort. And then just when you're about ready to say no, that's when it flips and it goes from dark to light. And it not only gives you hope, but it shows you how you can be part of that hope. So it takes that message. This is terrible. And then it makes you feel that emotion like, I want to do something about that. If you have any heart at all, you do.
Yeah.
And then it gives you away. So that's the message. So I'm excited. There's a larger film that'll live inside an anti-trafficking toolkit that we're creating as well. That'll be closer to 10 minutes long. But these are full-scale cinematic productions. These are actors and locations and big crews. The last couple we shot, our crews were like 60 people and cast and crew. And so I'm excited about that. I've got a documentary series of short, like 5-minute pieces that are all about people who were a part of a Johns Hopkins religious leader study where they ingested psilocybin and reported, in the moment what they were seeing and feeling, and just really interesting studies around spirituality. So I'm excited.
These were religious figures, right? These were folks that
they're
are
clergy,
practicing members of religious organizations, right? So it's not just a sampling of citizens doing this. This is people that are in
ordained
their religious communities recognized as leaders, right? Yeah,
that's
what
right.
Interesting study to see the results of that when you have a chance to publish the work that you're doing right now.
Actually, New York Times just came out with an article about this whole thing. I think last month. You can look it up. Just search Hopkins psychedelic religious study.
Yeah, I'll link that in the show notes for folks.
Yeah, and then I'm friends with a gentleman named Rick Doblin, who is the founder of MAPS, which is a big psychedelic science nonprofit organization pushing for advocacy for therapeutic use. And he has read the study that Hopkins has not yet published, but he was one of the peers reviewing it, basically. And so one of the things he told me was he said it was all just so data heavy that it was completely unrelatable. He said, so what you're doing by telling the actual stories or letting the people tell their own stories is really what we're doing.
Right.
He said, this is just one of the most important things happening in this realm today. So that was really encouraging. But again, the power of storytelling trumps
Right.
everything. So
Yeah. The data is important. We need the quantitative data. We need experts. We need facts and figures. But if the experts want average people to understand the significance of their data, facts, and figures, it needs to be translated for people. And we do that through the power of storytelling, through the power of words and emotions.
right,
So, yeah,
the
it's,
spiritual connection, that's,
yeah,
to me, that's exactly, we are spiritual beings, that stories are spiritual connections. We connect on an emotional level. To me, that's a spiritual level. And yeah, average citizens, but honestly, everyone,
yeah,
it's just, it's going to be the thing that moves you.
right,
Even how you present data in the form of a story, then you can present that data and the data becomes far more emotionally
right. More
impactful
meaningful.
once you
Exactly.
do. Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely.
that's an exciting one too. That one's still, it's begun, but we're waiting on some additional funding to finish it. Um, but these are interesting things. I've got another project I'm doing right now, a small one on storytelling about foster kids and families, success stories. And that's a really difficult world. And some of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
sex trafficking thing overlaps
Overcome. Sure, sure.
in that world too. So
Yeah,
taking some tricky subjects, none of these subjects I'm working on right now are easily discussed.
sure.
They bring up all kinds of emotions from people,
Yeah,
but I like that. I like the challenge of that.
yeah. Well, you shared with me one of the spots, or two of the spots actually, of your anti-sex trafficking, and I can't wait for those to be released to the wider public. The first one you shared with me is a 60-second spot. I was crying when it was over. I mean, it was such a moving experience in 60 seconds to tell this incredible story, and then, like you said, end it with a bit of hope and a bit of action that someone can do to help. And it was incredibly powerful. Probably, I think, Adam, um, the most powerful 60-second PSA I think I've ever seen. I mean, it's really an amazing piece of work that you put together. I'm going to call it art, even though it's touching on such an uncomfortable, difficult, dark situation. The way you approached that ugliness of humanity, um, and spun it into the hope that humanity can also do something about that darkness. And it was really stunning. I can't wait for it to be released, and when it does go public, we will share it on our website and social media channels as well, because I know it won't be ready for the time that this airs. But I want to help you spread that message when it is out there. Who are you doing that work for? I don't recall you mentioning that when you told the story of that work that you're doing. I think that's important to get that out there so folks know
Yeah.
what that organization is, so they can start supporting it now, even before they see the great spots that you're doing for them.
Yeah, definitely. The anti-trafficking organization is based in Houston, and they're called Red M. Red, the word red, the letter M. They're a nonprofit, headed up and founded by, who's become a close friend of mine now, a gentleman named David Reed. David has a full-time gig also, but this is quickly consuming most of his time. It's mainly a volunteer-based organization, but they have a national network. And it's basically saying, if you have a skill, we can, and you hate trafficking, we can help you figure out how to utilize that skill for good, for our shared purpose. And so what I did was I built a whole program, and presented it to David, which was basically like, if you're going to empower all these people, then let's give them the tools they need to be empowered, right? You
Yeah,
can't just say, if you're really good at writing, you can help write for Red M. I mean, that's not enough. If you get 10,000 willing writers, who are you going to choose? And
right,
so
right.
we need to give them something. We need to give the public something, and it's a one size fits all anti-trafficking toolkit that helps you start a movement in your own community.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
so Red M, and then the others. The energy film, that's a personal project. Myself and the executive producer. Um, and then the Johns Hopkins psychedelic thing, that was funded privately through donations, but that's sort of in conjunction with another nonprofit called Lagare, and it's a Christian psychedelic society.
Right on.
Founded by one of the members of the study.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of getting close to some time here. Promote yourself a little bit. How can folks get in touch with you if they want to know more about your work or engage you in a project that they're working on? What is you do so much promoting others. Do a little bit to promote yourself.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I forget to do that from time to time.
We all do. We get caught up in the good works we're doing, and we forget to say
Yeah.
a little bit about ourselves. So now's your shot.
So my company is called Narrative Paintbrush, and I think the name really speaks for itself. To me, storytelling is an art. We like to apply our art to meaningful messages. So I like to say art with a cause, or storytelling with a purpose, with a cause, something that does good for other people. So if you're looking to just learn more about how to tell good stories, if you're looking for consultation in this way, if you're looking for a complete storytelling project, we do all those things. And I'm the chief storyteller there. But narrativepaintbrush.com is where you can learn more about us and get in touch. We're a Denver-based company and kind of work all over the country.
Perfect. Well, we will put that all in the show notes as well, so folks can find you and hopefully give you some more great projects to work on.
I would love that.
Yeah.
I would love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if people want to just talk about it, if they just want to, I fly all over the place. I can fly in, fly out. It's really easy. I do it all the time, and I can help take your message and turn it into a story that's going to have that strong connection with the audience that you want to reach, and that will drive donations, fundraising, that will drive action, calls to action. We'll determine what those things are and then build a story around it. So that's really what I love to do.
Fantastic. Well, I want to wind up here. But certainly thank you. I'm incredibly grateful for you taking the time to join me on this first episode, and I'm immensely grateful for the relationship that started out as a working relationship a dozen years ago. But again, you really did crack open in me this idea that everyone can be a storyteller, and I've tried to pursue that since we started working together a dozen years ago, and I'm really grateful for that. I do want to end each episode in a similar way. We talk about some heavy subjects. I've got some other guests coming up in future episodes that are going to be also talking about these difficult subjects around sustainability, whether it's, how are we going to get clean energy, or what is climate change doing for us, or what is changing capitalism, transforming capitalism to be more purpose-based as opposed to just solely profit-based. I mean, these are some difficult things, and some of them are kind of dark and heavy. Climate injustices and social justice issues and environmental justice issues. So I want to end each show with a bit of hope. And, we talked about some heavy subject matter here too. Sex trafficking is immensely dark topic. And I commend you for working on shining a light on it to help raise awareness and hopefully bring that to an end. So I got some questions around hope. Hope being um, something that an individual can envision a better future for themselves or their community or the world or whatever, but a better future combined with the agency to help make it be, help it, so it's, you've got a vision and you've got some ability to make that vision a reality. So, first question for you, and this is kind of a rapid fire, just kind of give me your gut answer. What's your vision for a better future? Could be for you personally, professionally, globally, for the world. Just what's your vision for a better future?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an easy one. It's one word: love.
Okay.
My
Second,
vision for a better future is actually, if you wanted to add a few more words to that,
please
to
do.
really
Yeah.
define it, it would be acts of love. To me, love is a verb. It speaks; those actions speak so much louder than words. So I think, the more, and love comes in so many ways, and it can be so significant but still so small, sometimes so easy, but you have to be intentional. You have to give it, and then you receive it, and it just makes you want to give it more, because then you receive it more, and it's its own reward. And so, um, my hope and my vision for a better future would be if everyone pursued tiny acts of love more often than complaint or frustration. Honestly, most of the time, what people are complaining about, it's as if they have the luxury of complaint. And the way I
Okay.
see that is like, you're whining about stuff that's just so meaningless, but it's building this dark eruption inside of you that eventually will explode, and it's never going to be good. But if you rearrange that pursuit and that energy into acts of love, giving, not receiving, you will start to receive them, and your world will open up, and you'll let light in. And to me, that's the power of God, and we all need to embrace that, and that could absolutely lead, more than anything else, to a better future.
I think you covered my next question, but just to throw it out there, why? I think you covered the why pretty thoroughly, but is there anything else you want to add on to why acts of love is your vision for the future?
Because love is the truth, and the truth wins.
Perfect. Third and final question. Now imagine that your vision for the better future has come to be, and we are behaving and treating each other and showing acts of love more frequently. How does that make you feel?
I think it makes me feel free, and because there's always going to be some problems. There's always going to be a little drama. There's always, people are still going to get sick. We're all still bound for not being on this planet forever. But what it allows you to do is shrug those worries and shrug those petty cares, release that frustration, and just let it melt away. So that now you've got this freedom. And what can you do with your freedom? You can not only give more love out, but you can do it in forms that you really want to. So it would make me feel free to create more art.
Perfect. Well, with that, thank you, Adam. I am going to try to work towards a world where I'm doing more acts of love because I want that same freedom that you just described. What a beautiful vision for the future. I hope we can all get there together. So, thank
Amen.
you, my friend, for being part of this first episode. I think you got us kicked off in a wonderful direction. And I couldn't have ended on a better note than talking about the power of love to go along with the power of storytelling. So thank you, Adam, for being here. I wish you all the best, my friend.
Thank you, my friend.
Well, all right. That brings us to the end of episode 1 of Stories Sustain Us. I want to take a moment to thank Adam Stielstra one more time for joining me on this very first episode. I appreciate his time. I appreciate his perspective on the power of storytelling and all of the great work that he's doing in the realm of sustainability. And I was really grateful to hear what his vision for the future is, this idea that each of us can do more acts of love to help make the world a better place. That really resonated with me, in large part because that's what I'm trying to do with this show. This show, Stories Sustain Us, is one of my acts of love to try to make the world a better place. I came up with this show idea really because of years and years of watching and reading news that is just pretty horrible. Everywhere I turn, there's stories that are not great. When you look at environmental stories that are happening in the news, there's month after month, there's new heat records being set. There are people dying in India and the Philippines and Mexico and southern United States from heat-related illnesses as record-setting temperatures are being established over and over again. There's torrential storms happening around the world, the devastating floods in southern Brazil, the storm systems that are blowing through the plains of the United States that are dropping cantaloupe-sized hail on Texas. Everywhere you turn, glaciers are melting. Here in the Pacific Northwest where I am, Mount Rainier is losing its glaciers. We know glaciers are shrinking in Greenland and the Swiss Alps and in Antarctica. Everywhere you turn, there's an environmental story that says the planet's in trouble now, and it's predicted to get worse in the years and decades to come. Social stories aren't any better, right? There's political unrest around the world. Our political discussions are getting more and more polarized, thanks probably in large part to the wonderful algorithms of social media that have us all connected and finding ourselves in our own little echo chambers, so we don't even really realize we don't know how to talk to each other anymore. There's authoritarian language and elected officials gaining power throughout the world that is really troubling to me personally. And you add in other social issues like homelessness and drug addiction that are taking people every day from opioid and fentanyl overdoses, and not just in our big cities, but in rural areas as well. And then top all that off with the troubling reality that social inequalities still exist everywhere, whether it's race or gender, or sexuality or economic inequalities. Those seem to be getting worse, not better. So anywhere I turn to get my news over the last several years, it just seems to be a troubling world that we're living in. And if you're like me, that can bring up feelings of anger or frustration or worry or anxiety, or sometimes it can just feel overwhelming because the news is so big and so bad, and I'm just a single person. What can I do about it? So that overwhelming emotion comes on, which just kind of shuts you down and makes you tune it out. Well, that's what I'm trying to combat with this show. Stories Sustain Us is a program that I came up with because I want to feel inspired to do something different. I want to help change the world any way I can, even if it's just a little bit. And I know there are millions and millions of people out there doing amazing things every day. And I want to talk to them. I want to get to know them. I want to be inspired by them. And if I'm going to talk to them, I might as well record it and share it with you so that maybe you can get inspired too. So that's what we're trying to accomplish with this show, Stories Sustain Us, is to use the power of storytelling to inspire actions. So I appreciate Adam summing it all up for me by saying we should all do more acts of love. I hope you heard something today in this episode, number 1, that you enjoyed, that inspired you into action, that maybe resonated with you and where you are in your journey, and that you'll want to come back and listen to or watch episode number 2. Let me tell you just a little bit about that. It's going to be released on June 25th. Our guest is from the area around London, and he is the founder of the Changemakers Alliance. And we have this great conversation about what it means to be a change maker and how anyone can be a change maker, whether you're doing something small just for your own neighborhood or community or something grand to make the world a better place. Everybody can be a change maker, and everybody can help make the world a better place. So the conversation also talks about how we can transform our economic model from being about the single bottom line profit and move towards a more triple bottom line where our businesses and our jobs are driven by purpose that have to do with people, planet, and profitability. So it's a great conversation on episode 2 of Stories Sustain Us that'll come out on June 25th. You can get it on our website, storiesustainus.com, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. So until then, I'm your host, Stephen Schauer. Thank you for being here with me. I wish you all well and would ask you to take care of yourself until next time. So cheers. Goodbye. Take care.